All right, so get this. We're diving into Dominion Energy today. You know them, the energy giant. We're talking power lines, gas pipelines, the whole shebang. But what's really got my attention is this wild story about them prepping for cyber attacks. Like it's a scene from Die Hard, but with more kilowatts and fewer explosions, hopefully.
Yeah, it's not just Hollywood drama, though. This cyber fortress thing where they're like teaming up with the Marines,
Mm.
the Department of Defense. It really shows they're taking cybersecurity seriously and for good reason.
Seriously, this article from Richmond was talking about simulating attacks on the power grid.
Right.
Can you imagine if someone actually pulled that off?
Yeah.
No lights, no internet, hospitals running on backup generators. It'd be,
Chaos.
yeah.
Total chaos.
Yeah.
And it's not just a what if anymore. Energy regulators are seeing a huge spike in actual attempts to hack these systems,
Oh, wow.
which I think really highlights why Dominion is pouring resources into cybersecurity. They're on the front lines of protecting something that we all rely on.
But they are like the digital guardians of the power grid, so they're clearly not messing around when it comes to cybersecurity. But how does that tie into their financial strategy? We've got those market beat reports, their stock performance.
Right, and those reports tell an interesting story. Dominion, or D as it's known in the stock market, closed yesterday at $57.13, down a bit. Analysts currently have it as a hold rating.
Hold on. Break that down for me. What does hold actually tell us?
It means it's not necessarily a screaming buy now stock, but it's not a sinking ship either.
Hmm.
What they're basically saying is this company is stable. Let's see what they do next.
Okay, so it's a wait and see for investors, but what are they waiting to see? What's the potential upside here?
That's where it gets interesting. So their earnings per share, that's the profit they make for each share of the company you own, are projected to grow by over 22% this quarter,
Wow.
which gets investors' attention because more earnings usually mean the stock price goes up, which is good news for anyone who owns a piece of Dominion.
So we've got this intriguing mix of steady performance with the potential for big growth. They also just paid out a quarterly dividend. And I know for folks who like those regular payouts from their investments, that's music to their ears.
Absolutely. That dividend is a sign of confidence. It tells investors we're doing well enough to share the profits and we believe in our future. It suggests they're not just thinking short term.
It's like they're saying, we're here for the long haul. But the energy world is changing fast. So how are they adapting to this whole clean energy wave? I mean, are they still clinging to coal and gas, or are they catching the renewable energy wave?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's what makes Dominion fascinating. They're walking a tightrope, balancing those traditional energy sources with a pretty aggressive push toward renewables. We're talking solar farms, wind farms, the whole renewable buffet.
So they're not ditching their old playbook entirely, but they are adding some new plays to the lineup. What's the strategy there? Are they just trying to appease the green crowd, or is there a bigger game plan?
It's definitely more strategic than just hopping on a trend. They seem to understand that the energy game is changing, and they're positioning themselves to be major players in this new world. And it's not just about building wind turbines, it's about the future of how we power our lives.
And how does their focus on cybersecurity play into this whole renewable energy shift? It seems like a separate issue, but I have a feeling it's all connected.
You're absolutely right. It's all connected. Think of it this way. As we rely more and more on renewable energy sources, the power grid becomes even more important. It's like the circulatory system of a clean energy future.
Okay, I'm with you. The grid is vital, but what does that have to do with hackers and firewalls?
A more modern, adaptable grid built with cybersecurity in mind from the ground up is less vulnerable to attacks. And a resilient grid means fewer disruptions for you and me. Imagine if a cyber attack could shut down a wind farm. That would be a major setback for clean energy.
So they're thinking about the big picture here. Cybersecurity isn't just about protecting data, it's about protecting the future of energy itself. That's a pretty heavy thought.
Exactly, and it's this long-term thinking that we need to unpack to really understand where Dominion is headed. It's not just about today's stock price. It's about their position in a world that's changing rapidly.
Okay, so we've got cybersecurity, renewable energy, and a stock that's holding steady with the potential for growth. What I'm hearing is that this is a company in transition, but what does that actually look like on the ground in the real world? Where are they putting their money where their mouth is, so to speak?
That's the key question. And to answer that, we need to look beyond the headlines and dig into the details of their investments.
All right, let's roll up our sleeves and get into those details, because that's where things usually get really interesting.
So we've talked about this push into renewables, but what's really caught my eye is how they're putting their money where their mouth is. It's not just a few token solar panels here.
Okay, so break it down for me. What's got you so intrigued? What are they actually investing in?
They're going all in on utility-scale renewable energy projects. So think massive solar farms, sprawling wind farms,
Mhm.
even exploring things like offshore wind power. These are the kind of projects that can really move the needle when it comes to clean energy production.
Those sound impressive, but those mega projects must come with mega price tags. Are they just banking on their own cash reserves, or are they getting creative with funding?
That's where it gets savvy. They're using a mix of strategies, so they're tapping into their own resources, of course, but they're also forming strategic partnerships and leveraging government incentives for renewable energy projects.
Huh. So they're playing the field, so to speak, using every tool at their disposal to make these projects a reality. It's like they're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
Exactly, and it's paying off.
Yeah.
For example, they recently announced this joint venture to develop a massive offshore wind farm, which is a huge undertaking. And by partnering with another company, they're sharing the risk and potentially reaping even bigger rewards.
Smart. But let's not forget about the human side of this energy transition. We're talking about jobs, communities, entire industries being reshaped. It's not just about watts and megawatts, it's about people's lives.
You hit the nail on the head, and to be honest, this is where I think a lot of companies fall short. They focus on the bottom line, and they forget about the people who are impacted by their decisions.
Okay, so how is Dominion stacking up on that front? Are they just throwing money at the problem, or are they taking a more thoughtful approach?
This is what impressed me. They've implemented these programs to help retrain workers from coal-fired power plants for jobs in renewable energy.
Oh, wow.
So they're talking about providing those workers with the skills they need to actually thrive in this new energy economy.
Now, that's something you don't see every day, a company actually investing in the future of its workforce, even as the nature of that work changes dramatically. That's a big deal.
It is a big deal, and I think it speaks volumes about their commitment to this idea of a just transition. But they're not stopping there. They're also investing in the communities where these plants are located, providing funding for economic development, education, even infrastructure improvements.
Wow. So they're not just clocking out when the work is done. They're sticking around to make sure that the community thrives, even as the energy landscape shifts.
Precisely thinking about the long-term well-being of these communities, not just the short-term bottom line.
That's got to count for something, right? I mean, in this day and age, you don't always see that kind of commitment from corporations. It makes you wonder if maybe they're onto something, that taking care of your people and your communities is actually good business in the long run.
It's a refreshing perspective, and it's not just about altruism. There's a growing movement among investors to consider these environmental, social, and governance factors, ESG for short, when they're making investment decisions.
ESG, that's a whole other deep dive waiting to happen, but in a nutshell, it's about putting your money where your values are right, supporting companies that are doing right by the planet and their people.
Exactly. And from that perspective, Dominion's focus on a just transition and community investment suddenly looks very strategic.
Yeah.
They're not just doing good business, they're doing good business.
It's like they're playing 4D chess while everyone else is stuck in a game of checkers.
Okay, so I'm sold on their commitment to their workforce and communities, but let's not forget they're operating in a highly regulated industry. The energy sector is constantly grappling with changing policies and regulations, so how are they navigating those choppy waters? That's a crucial point. You can have all the best intentions and all the innovative ideas in the world, but if you're on the wrong side of regulations, it can all come crashing down.
So how is Dominion playing the regulatory game? Are they just reacting to changes as they come, or are they trying to shape the game itself?
They seem to be taking a more proactive approach. They're actively engaging with policymakers and regulators, advocating for policies that support both their business interests and the clean energy transition. They're essentially trying to get a seat at the table where the rules are being written.
That's smart. It's like the old saying goes, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So they're not content with just following the rules. They want to be part of shaping them.
Exactly. And it's not just about lobbying for their own interests either.
Hmm.
They're also positioning themselves as these thought leaders in the energy space, participating in industry conferences and publishing research on clean energy solutions. So they're really trying to influence the direction of the entire industry.
Okay, so they're playing the long game, thinking about the bigger picture, but let's bring it back down to the individual investor for a moment. What does all of this, the cybersecurity, the renewables, the social responsibility, what does it all mean for someone who might be considering investing in Dominion Energy?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to answer that, we need to synthesize all this information and look at the bigger picture.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here. Cybersecurity, renewable energy, social responsibility, navigating the regulatory maze. It's like Dominion Energy is playing this high stakes game on multiple levels, but for someone listening to this, someone who's maybe thinking about dipping their toes into the energy sector, what's the takeaway?
That is the question, isn't it? And I think it really boils down to this. Dominion is a company in transition, but it's a transition that they seem to be navigating thoughtfully and, dare I say, strategically.
Okay, but there are a lot of companies out there who are dipping their toes into renewable energy. What makes Dominion stand out from the crowd? Why should our listener pay attention to them specifically?
Here's the thing. It's not just about slapping a few solar panels on a roof or calling it a day, right? It's about a fundamental shift in how a company thinks about energy, about its role in a rapidly changing world. And based on what we're seeing with their investments, their partnerships, even their approach to cybersecurity and workforce development, I think Dominion gets that.
So they're not just following the clean energy trend, they're trying to stay ahead of it, which could be good news for long-term investors like you. But it's still a gamble, right? I mean, no one has a crystal ball. What if the energy landscape shifts again? What if some new technology comes along and disrupts everything?
That's the nature of the game, isn't it? The energy sector is constantly evolving. But I think that's also what makes it so exciting. And I think Dominion's willingness to adapt, to embrace new technologies, to invest in its workforce, all of that positions them well for whatever the future holds. They're not afraid to make bold moves, and I think sometimes that's what it takes to be a leader.
So for a listener who's maybe looking at their portfolio, thinking about the future, what's the one big takeaway you want them to walk away with today?
Look beyond the headlines. Look beyond the quarterly earnings reports. Dominion Energy is sending a clear message. They're in it for the long haul, and they're betting big on a future that is powered by clean energy. Now, whether that bet pays off, well, that's a question for another deep dive.
And that's what makes this so fascinating. It's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the future of how we power our lives and the companies that are shaping that future. We've gone from cyber attacks to dividend payouts to the future of the energy grid, all in a day's work for a deep dive. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this Dominion's focus on retraining workers for the clean energy transition that got me thinking what other industries could benefit from that kind of forward-thinking approach. Food for thought. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope you found this exploration of Dominion Energy as insightful as we did. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep diving deeper.